Welcome to Tales to be Told in the Dark, and we're up to episode 30. Incredibly, number 30 already. I think it was number 27 when I looked at Germany. Now, I can't remember where I heard this. It may well be a Rudolf Steiner lecture. I can't be 100% certain at the moment. But looking at the different continents, I seem to remember Africa was thought of as being, I think it was the legs. And if I remember rightly, Europe was seen as the head. So it comes down to this, what I sort of alluded to, and I don't think I really explained it sufficiently when we're talking about Europe. In particular, we're talking about the Central Powers, as they were called. So that would be Germany and Austria, the sort of Germanic speaking regions, shall we say. But of course, these things radiate outwards and have an influence, directly or indirectly, on nations to the west and to the east. But that, I feel, is just an external play out. So just to go back over this again, what has prompted this was a Rudolf Steiner lecture I listened to last night. Well, actually, it was early this morning. The fifth post-Atlantean age, the French Revolution. Now, this French Revolution inspired Schiller to look at this, who then encouraged Goethe to sort of, or they were both inspired. Now, I spoke of this bloom of creativity through the arts, centered on the Central Powers, in particular Germany and also Austria. And by extension, you could say with Austria that Austro-Hungarian Empire comes into this as well, and the very much greater expanse that the German Empire had, that went right round to the Baltic states at one time, incorporating Prussia. So we're talking quite a large body, as it were, of these central powers. Now, if we internalize the central power, where is the central power inside us? But now, what was interesting about this was Schiller was inspired from what he saw of the French Revolution. So we're looking on one side of the centre, in this particular case France. Now, this is repeated in the music in the post-Beethoven age. This, what was called the New German music, actually started really with Hector Berlioz, who's obviously French, with a Symphonie Fantastique, which in turn inspired Franz Liszt, who's actually classed as Hungarian. So this, who then went on to try and establish a new German music school in the 19th century based in Weimar. Now, Liszt being Liszt, very much atypical of his star sign or his birth sign, which is Libra. And Libra always striving for balance and trying to be the balance. Because he stood by his moral code, his principles, and he wasn't coerced, he had to eventually give up with the idea of Weimar. This is something that Wagner talks about in one of his essays, which I will get to at some point on the other channel. One of Wagner's prose works, which is very perceptive. Actually, all of Wagner's prose works are very perceptive. Don't be put off by the politicized connotations that are associated with Wagner. That is the agitated reaction, because Wagner is basically shining a light on a mechanism that is still very relevant in this world today and still very much behind a lot of things. We call it the hidden hand, and the hidden hand doesn't like to use its own hands and certainly doesn't like to get them dirty, but they get very sticky, like a very young child when you give it chocolate on a hot day, and it's like, don't touch me with those hands, you're covered in stickiness. It's that type of thing. So you've got this, what started in France, and then has found its balance from basically Austro-Hungarian area, and then centered it in the Central Powers in Germany. I think I put forward this idea that around Germany, from really we could say 1764 as the defined marker year, which incidentally was the year that Mozart, at the age of 8, I think it was, composed his first symphony. It's also a Phoenix year, 1764. And this golden age goes right up really till 1902. But these things are never defined with a clear cut-off point on a specific year. So you could see really from about 1685 with George Frederick Handel and Johann Sebastian Bach, you've got this emerging high point of art that is coming around out of the Baroque era, which is very structured, and then it starts to transition. Then you get composers like Joseph and Michael Haydn. You've got the 4 or 5 sons of Johann Sebastian Bach, and probably the most influential that inspired many composers after his time was Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, particularly with the symphony. And then you've got these other strands. You've got Ignaz Pleyel, who was a pupil of Joseph Haydn, who then went on to be something of a rival to Haydn, and very nice, very easy listening music. Haydn wrote something like 104 symphonies, and they all have a freshness and a originality to them. It's a phenomenal output. I'm digressing a little bit here, I know, but you've got this flowering in the German-speaking world. Now, if we look at the word Germany, Germany, It's germinating many. This is creativity. Now, I've suggested that this golden age in this Germanic region, I would look at it in the same way that many people will look to what is called the Greek era. But, of course, it was going somewhere and it was changing so much across, led by the arts, that the control system had to sort of do something about it. So really the sort of, you've got the rivalry or the potential rival to the British Empire in this new nation called Germany, this unified Germany, that as an economic power is growing at such a fantastic rate. It was on the point of overtaking Great Britain, which I feel has a lot to do with the real reasons for the First World War. And then, of course, you have this rapid decline. You have what will be classed as the very decadent era in Berlin, where effectively during the inflation period from about 1923, where people were using banknotes as wallpaper because it was absolutely worthless. The story goes it was like a wheelbarrow load of marks that ran into the millions with this inflation just to buy a loaf of bread. But king of currencies at that time in Berlin was the dollar, and it is said that you could have sex with anything for a dollar. It got to such a depraved level that it's almost setting the stage for the rise of the whole National Socialist movement off the back of a nation that's been humiliated and defeated, and the psychological effect of that would have had. But this inflation period and then the coming of the Third Reich, they're not different sides. They're two sides of the same coin, as it were. It's the pincer movement again, with the dividers. Between both the extreme left and, shall we say, the extreme right of it all, was enough to sort of destroy this golden age, and you see this marked end of creativity, where you had this flowering of Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, early Schumann, Brahms, Wagner, Liszt, and so on. And with the writers as well, you've got Schiller and Goethe, who inspired particularly the likes of Franz Liszt with the symphonic poems and things. So I feel that this golden age was deliberately sabotaged because it was opening up art and creativity. This is something Rudolf Steiner talks about, and I feel he has the most accurate perception on what Wagner was trying to do with the total artwork of bringing all the arts back together and taking it back to the perception of the Greek era. And we've moved, by the time we get into the 19th century, during Beethoven's time and then after Beethoven, you've got this Romantic era, which is inspired by the literary works. So you've got this crossover of the arts, where one art, the paintings and the writings are inspiring the musical arts. And it is a beautiful flowering that I don't know if we'll ever see this quite in that way again. Of course, these are all stories and perceptions and things, but I feel it is a huge validation. Now I go with it's the type of thing that Wagner would have said. It's in the film called Wagner with Richard Burton in the sort of lead role playing Wagner, where he says, self-loathing has become the highest virtue that man can achieve, but through art we will make man whole again. And that is very central to everything to do with Varnfried University and the Web Art Productions channel. And I feel that is that center point, that central power within us. Art is creativity, after all. It involves using the imagination. Now, something Wagner pointed out was this rise of this plastic art, as he called it. In some ways, a lot of this film music is very plastic, in that the composer has not got to use his imagination to create a piece of music. He is writing music from various subsets of musical techniques to fit a existing picture, rather than being the one that creates the music purely from the imagination. Okay, it can be inspired externally, but the internal creation process is very much with the imagination, where it doesn't quite work with film music most of the time. And to be honest, a lot of the films are, I know it's all subjective. I do appreciate, for example, as an aside, the Alfred Hitchcock directing of films, and that there are some effective film pieces of film music, like the famous shower scene with that sort of high-pitched, rapid bowing on violin strings to represent the sort of repeated slashing with that knife in that shower scene, which is only implied. It's not actually shown, if you notice, and that's all it needs. It's just enough of an impression without all this desensitized gore that you get in films today, leaving nothing at all to the imagination, be it good or bad, of course. All part of this, not an evolution of humanity, but a devolution of humanity, where thinking is getting contracted, attention spans are getting contracted, freedoms and everything are getting restricted and contracted, and a lot of employment is now involving contracts. It's a repeat pattern across the whole spectrum with all these things. One thing reflects in something else. That's for certain with this material world. So I feel there is a lot that can be learned if you take the essence of the stories of things, and I feel very much drawn to that whole 19th century, and of course it spills out in a positive way. You have the French Impressionists, as they're called, like Debussy and Ravel, which is a musical version of the Impressionist painters. You've got the Slavic composers like Dvorak and Smetana and Kodai and Janacek. You've got, representing Scandinavia, you've got the likes of Grieg and Sibelius, these flowerings that have come out of this. And of course, can't forget the very distinct Russian composers as well. So it's not just Germany itself, but the inspiration that came out of that and where it sort of led on and what it inspired and the way it sort of radiated out. If we turn this into the metaphysical, into the micro universe within inside oneself, it's that same, it's germinating, hence germ many. It's germinating that seed inside oneself, that spark, that it's the place of the sun, which is the solar plexus. It's reflected in nature that for a seed to grow, it needs to be in fertile soil. So if you are open-minded to all possibilities and things, that is the fertile soil. If you are firewalled off, as it were, by religious dogma, limiting belief systems and things, and no, if it doesn't fit this idea, then it can't be. And I'm sticking with this idea, and I'm not accepting any new ideas because they conflict with what I believe in. That sort of thing. That is not fertile soil. That's the barren wastelands where the seed will not grow. Now, I had a discussion a little while ago with Lana Elabonte, and we've been sort of talking things backwards and forwards on different topics, and I said to her, it depends on what your perception of this reality is. I feel that this is where, I think it's about 13 years of family history research, the irony being that it wasn't even my family at all, it turns out, and probably not even blood related to any of them. But it was a very good training ground because it gets to a point where you can only get to most probable. For example, you may find out facts and figures about an ancestor, so let's say 5 or 6 generations back, but what was their favourite food? What was their favourite colour? What, in fact, did they even look like? Because when we're going into a pre-photographic age, there's very few people that would have had paintings done of themselves, commissioned paintings of themselves. So there's very little to go on. So you can only reach a point of most probable. So turning that to this reality, it depends what feels right. I'd rather get to a point of most probable. But it still leaves it open to new ideas, new information coming forward that I may not have come across at this precise moment. But maybe tomorrow there'll be something comes through, say through YouTube, and just sort of lands in the lap. But it's a bit like this Rudolf Steiner lecture. So I'll put the link in the description about that, and you can hear it for yourselves. So in terms of Varnfried University, that is your homework. You don't have to do it. There is no examination. You're not going to be tested on it. The only testing is what you do to yourself. And as much as you wish to look into things, then do so. I'm just purely sharing what I feel will be of benefit. But I cannot give a one-size-fits-all answer about anything because we all have individual circumstances, individual lives. So take whatever you can, if it feels right to you, and apply it to your own life, but make it your own. Don't be a follower. It's not about having a following at all. It's doing what we can collectively to raise the collective consciousness. This was actually something that Lana mentioned about. This is the big trap, that you're supposed to love everybody, you're supposed to like everybody. Consider now, even with the internet, but take this also without the internet. How many of this alleged 7.5 to 8 billion people of the world do you even interact with? So do you have to even like them, let alone love them? Because you'll probably never come into contact with them. And just because a government says we declare war on this or that country, are you going to listen to the gossip and hearsay, which is the heresy, and just go along with it? Because why do I need to have hatred towards this or that group of people based on some story that I don't even know is to be true? And what is the evidence of it? Something shown on the television? Which has clearly got an agenda behind that. So you can just get along with people, and really you can, if you think of yourself as you are your own government, so everything external of you that you have interaction with, you can be your own diplomatic service. And try and be amicable with the neighbouring nations, as it were, i.e. other beings. It's saying about if you want world peace, for example, then you have to end the war inside yourself. Because it all starts within, and comes back down, like round full circle, to the central powers. Where is the central power within inside us? That surely is the middle path. There was yes, I know. Yes. So the point of most probable, I can see this in terms of it being a computer game, and there are points that I cannot prove, I cannot show you anything. I can only relay my experience of being in a place which I would call the void. As a physical description, we could say it's beyond the stars, where I witnessed this, what basically looks like a base-to-base pyramid. So basically forming a diamond that revolves, one half of it revolves one way, one half revolves the other way. And it's like in the middle of it is a very white light, surrounded by a magenta. That's the closest I can describe it. And to try and put this into physical terms is really difficult, but if you could imagine like a black of space, but it's thick, it's like black velvet, but you can see perfectly fine in it. When I say see, it's seeing with the mind's eye, because you're not even aware of having a body by this stage when you get to this thing. So whether that is within the astral realm or it's, so in computer terms, so we say it's a bonus level that most characters, unless they find the doorway through, don't go into that extra bit. But then you're still within the game, you're still within the matrix. Even this living off grid, it's still within a matrix. If the whole thing is a construct or a simulation or a hologram. See, I'm open to all these ideas. But the one that sits best of all to me is Neville Goddard's explanation. And to me, it makes the most sense. If you have this creator that created everything, why can't that creator express itself in infinite multiple forms as characters, as physical appearance, at the same time, i.e. as humanity? But of course, there's so many dogmas and things that you can't be the creator. No, not the complete whole creator, but what about that nursery rhyme, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall? Well, did not man fall, as it were? Is that the fall? Because mankind is definitely being fooled by this hidden hand system. And I feel we're at the point where we are very close to this spiritual evolution on one hand, but on the other hand, for a larger number of, and I use the term in its broadest sense, humanity, many more will go down a different route, which is actually a devolution rather than an evolution. But coming right back full circle, you've also got what started with the French Revolution. So it's revolving, it's going round, it's implying a loop like the metaverse, and it just keeps going round and round infinite times. As individualized conscious beings in the lower I sense, then yeah, we probably have no or very little recollection or ability to detect, and most don't detect past lives. And who's to say whether they're real or not real if the only thing that exists is now? It's a big topic to which I cannot actually give you a definitive answer to. But I feel it's something where you just get it to a point where it feels right to you and is most probable. And coupled with that, if there is things that would suggest things that are evident, like this ability to co-create, imagination creates reality, and the power is in the feeling, the true sight is in the feeling. And this is a personal testimony that I have tested this, as Neville invites everybody to do. Test it for yourselves. And I found it to be true. How successful it is depends on how much feeling I can put into it, how much I can overwrite the external. Because even this life that I have now, and the lifestyle that I have now, it comes with its own set of challenges. It's not completely separate from the outside world. There are certain things that can't be grown, or so far I haven't found alternative ways, so therefore it requires buying in from the corporate world until such time and resources allow for things to be changed. So there's always something to be done on that side of things. It's not all physical work. It's the balance. There's the mental agility. My days actually start with, before I've even physically moved, it's planning out the day and what I wish to achieve, and then holding the feeling of achieving what I wish to do, and then I can tell how well that's gone by the end of the day as whether I have achieved it or not. There are, of course, other factors, environmental factors like how hot it is, how you actually feel on that day. Does the body feel tired? It's finding that balance, that central power, again, within inside oneself. The balance between being and doing. And that is something that I feel everybody can import, is to, rather than having this continuous bombardment of an information overload, to find time and space which you have to create for yourself. Even within this physical world, you can create time and space where you are just being rather than doing. So you have time to reflect and weigh things up. Because if you're always doing, you're always chasing. And you're not allowing yourself time to think. You're not allowing the body to rest. It's in a continuous state of agitation, which is probably quite detrimental in terms of what the thinking is going to send as a signal to the physical body. And the physical body will respond, and you may get aches across your shoulders and neck, for example. So you may be concerned about the external world and trying to solve all the problems in the world, taking the weight of the world upon your shoulders, and then you wonder why you're getting stiff shoulders and things. That's the body telling. That's just one of many, many examples. There's a saying about you are your own worst enemy. Well, if you go with the idea that we are all fractalized versions of the Creator, experiencing what we have created and what we have dreamt up, with that sort of concept, and then the realization that, well, if I am God, and then the other person I'm looking at is also God, then why would I want to be a self-harmer? Because if I'm attacking the other person, I'm effectively attacking myself at the same time, which is basically, as far as I can see, is the definition of self-harming. So would the Creator be a self-harmer? We have this mortal perspective on things, but I'm looking at this more from an immortal, I am mortal perspective, the I'm a mortal perspective, which is an acknowledgement that I am in a physical body, but I am not the physical body, but I need the physical body to interact and experience that which I have created. But I haven't created it all as an individual as such. I've come into the game as an individual expression. So I have an individual identity, but at the same time, I acknowledge that I'm a part of something which is something that we all are as such. It's like taking an individual hair on the head, and that one hair, if it could think, was thinking, this is me, not realizing that you're actually rooted to something far greater than each individual strand of hair. So I hope that has been thought-provoking, has given you plenty to mull over, and do please listen to the Rudolf Steiner about the French Revolution. And what Steiner says in there is so profound. What Schiller and how he encouraged Goethe is, it validates exactly what Wagner was showing. To me, it's confirmation of this intuitive going with the intuition on things, To me, it's validation of how I perceive things, and it's very much following on what I would call the great work. Now, the great work I feel is what I mentioned earlier. We will make man whole again through art. Now, in that Steiner lecture, it talks about how you couldn't have a world where everybody is a poet, and who is going to maintain the series if everybody is a poet? So you can live in this, he described it as the natural world, but I mean, that's part of the materialist world, but we class that in with the natural world, the physical world, shall we say. And then you have the poet. But between the two, between the metaphysical and the physical, you have art, which is that central power, that meeting point. So you're walking in two worlds at the same time and finding that balance, particularly when you're living in an off-grid type of lifestyle. You then do have to take more responsibility for sorting out all the things that you would have maintenance people come in. You have to do these things yourself, so you are becoming multi-skilled in the process. So there is a balance to be found in the being and doing, even in this type of scenario. But this is probably the most idyllic way of doing it, more in keeping with and working with nature as opposed to trying to overcome nature, but also inspired by the art in all its forms, and then finding the balance between the two and the walking in two worlds at once, as it were. So I hope that has inspired you to, or maybe given you a different perspective to look at things. Let me know in the comments. And on a final note, any donations would be very welcome. I am under no illusion and I haven't mastered manifesting to that degree yet that I can say I don't need anybody's help. I feel we all need to help each other. There's such a thing as reciprocal exchange, which is very different from the system version of exchange, where you think you're earning money, but you're not. You're giving your time in exchange for a piece of paper, but it's not even a piece of paper these days. It's figures on a screen, which by agreement the concept has a sort of value to it, but it doesn't actually have a value. But that's a whole topic in itself. So we'll end that here. Until next time, love to you all.